300,000 killers came to erase the sword singers from history. They expected a massacre. Instead, they found a blade forged of pure soul. Draw near the hearth, traveler, for the sands of Hammerfell are soaked in more than just heat. They are stained with the memory of an extinction. You know the Redguards as the masters of the blade, but you've forgotten the price they paid to keep them. Before the first ship reached the Iliac Bay, the sword singers faced an ultimatum from a god emperor: surrender your spirit or perish in the dust. Emperor Hira didn't just bring an army, he brought a final solution to the Ansei problem. What happened at the foot of Hatu Mountain wasn't just a battle. It was the birth of a nation through the most desperate act of magic in the history of Nirn. Emperor Hira was no fool. He knew that to rule a desert, you must first break the spirits of those who thrive in its heat. He gathered an army of orcs and outcasts, a tide of 300,000 blades, for one purpose: the total erasure of the sword singer. They began in the cities, pulling artisans and poets from their homes. But the real target? Divod, the son of the legendary Frondar Hunding. They didn't just arrest him, they struck down his elderly mother before his very eyes. In that moment, a musician died and a monster was born. Divod didn't reach for a sword. He used the very chains binding his wrists to crush the skulls of his captors. But one man, even a vengeful one, cannot stop a genocide. The remaining singers fled like ash on the wind toward Hatu, the father of mountains. They found Frondar Hunding in a cave, composing his final death poem, ready for the void. He didn't want a war, he wanted peace. Yet, after 5 hours of shouting and flashes of light within that cave, Hunding emerged. He didn't bring a poem, he brought a plan. He called it the Hammer and the Anvil. 7 battles, travelers. 7 times the singers were forced to retreat, drawing Hira's massive horde deeper into the unforgiving wastes. They were outnumbered 30-1. Imagine the fatigue, the sand in your wounds, the sound of 300,000 boots chasing your extinction. But Hunding was training them with every step. He was teaching them to form the Shehai, the spirit sword. Not a blade of steel, but a weapon of pure, focused thought. At the base of Hatu Mountain, the hammer fell. The singers didn't just fight, they vanished into a trance of killing. When the sun set, the sands were no longer gold. They were a deep, pulsing crimson. 300,000 invaders lay dead. Hira's empire was shattered in a single afternoon. But victory has a bitter taste. The gentle citizens of Yokuda didn't see heroes. They saw red-drenched butchers with powers they couldn't understand. Hunding saw the writing on the wall. They packed their tents, took to the great ocean, and vowed to find a land where the sword was honored, not feared. They named it Hammerfell, a tribute to the blow that saved their souls but cost them their home. Remember that next time you see a Redguard warrior, their steel is sharp, but the spirit behind it was forged in a fire that burned an entire world to ash. But there is a final verse to Hunding's death poem that isn't found in the common scrolls, a truth that explains why the Shehai is now a lost art. After the slaughter at Hatu, the singers realized the spirit sword wasn't just a weapon, it was a parasite. To summon that much power, they had to trade away their capacity for peace. They didn't just kill Hira's army, they became the very monsters the world feared. When they reached the new land, Divod Hunding looked at his people and saw a nation of butchers who could never stop fighting. That is why he took the 5 great magical swords and buried them in the deepest vaults of the Hrothgarian mountains. He didn't hide them to save them, he hid them so the Redguards could finally let the spirit blade die. Hammerfell wasn't just named for a battle tactic, it was named for the heavy sound of 1,000 masters dropping their swords at once, choosing to be mortal men rather than living weapons. The Shehai is gone because the Redguards were brave enough to forget it. They chose a home over a legacy of blood, proving that the strongest blade is the one you have the courage to break. So listen closely as the embers die, traveler. The scholars tell you the Shehai is a lost art because the bloodlines grew thin, or the discipline was forgotten. They are wrong. It was not the desert that took the spirit blade from us. It was mercy. Divod Hunding looked at a nation of butchers and realized that a man with a sword of light in his hand has no room left for a soul of warmth. He buried the 5 great blades not to preserve their power, but to entomb the monster his people had become. Hammerfell isn't named for military tactic, it is named for the heavy, singular thud of 20,000 masters dropping their steel at once, choosing the quiet of the grave over the roar of the Ansei. They were brave enough to break their legacy so their children could finally know peace. The spirit sword is gone because the Redguards were strong enough to let it die. The fire dims, kinsman. If you have the stomach to unearth more truths hidden in the frost and sand, then mark your place at this hearth. Join our circle and let the world know the chronicler still speaks. And if you seek the dark origins of the First Era's most cursed crown, follow the trail to our next chronicle. Keep your eyes on the horizon and your hand off the hilt. Stay mortal.